Welcome to Hack Your Health with Dr. Nat, a transformative live stream TV show that brings wellness within everyone's reach. Each episode, featuring expert guests, delves into crucial topics like hormonal health, effective detoxification, and stress management through nervous system optimization. Gain practical insights into nutrition, supplementation, efficient workouts, and biohacking tools to enhance mental and physical health. So now, please welcome the host of Hack Your Health, Dr. Nat.
Hello and welcome to Hack Your Health with Dr. Nat. I am your host, Dr. Nathalie Beauchamp. Really looking forward to today's show. So the topic is the fatigue fix, simple solution for restoring energy holistically. So we're going to discuss with my guest the root causes of fatigue, because I know there's a lot of people walking around feeling fatigued, not understanding what is going on. We are going to talk about live blood cell analysis as well, because our guest uses this kind of tools to help his patient. And obviously, like always, we want to give you practical tools to figure out what you can do in your daily life for better energy. So that's on the menu, so to speak, for today. So I'm going to read the bio and the background of our guest. Dr. Emile Compan is a graduate of naturopathic school in Toronto, and he's gone to both the University of Victoria and the University of Montreal. So smart dude right there. And Emile has been practicing in Ottawa since 2001, and he's going to tell his story of why he became a naturopath, which is a pretty interesting and very deep story for Emile there. And he is also currently part of a group called the Canadian Pharmacovigilance, here's a mouthful there, team for a Germany company called Pasco that, reports on remedy safety and so forth. He's also a lecturer, and he's also a friend of mine, and we talk and chat often about health and what he's up to and what I'm up to. So I'm happy to bring him as a guest because I know he has a lot to share. So welcome, Emile.
Thank you.
So, Emile, we've known each other, as I mentioned, for many years, and you have a very interesting story of how you became a naturopath. So, I know it's something that you like to share with people because it's very empowering, and I think it's important for people to understand that many people struggle, and we find a way to be healthy and learn. So please share your story with us.
Sure. I'm one of those people who've always known what I wanted to be. I've always known I wanted to be a doctor, and so I did my studies at U Vic to do that pre-med studies. But at the age of 21, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. So I ended up having to stop school and go through 8 months of chemotherapy just to deal with the cancer. So I did. So I did the 8 months of chemotherapy. And then eventually with time, I ended up moving back to Montreal because that's where I'm originally from. And that's where my parents used to live at that time. So I restarted school again. And actually, I went to Concordia, not the University of Montreal. So, but the point is that I restarted my studies with the aim of getting back into the program to get into medical school. And then I had cancer a second time. And jokingly, I tell people, you know what? I'm a man. I didn't learn my lesson the first time, so I had to do it again. But the point is that this time, with the second time I went through a bone marrow transplant, which was another journey to this side of hell and back. But I managed to survive. And by that time, it's just like, well, my dream maybe of becoming a doctor was kind of like thin to nothing. So I ended up moving to Toronto and getting married, and I was working at a government job, a job that I liked, but it was a 24-hour shift kind of thing. And at 2 a.m, I was listening to a doctor talking about naturopathic medicine. It's like, well, what is that? And he was saying a few things, and one thing that caught my ear was that, yeah, sometimes I spend 2 hours with my patients. Like 2 hours. I mean, my doctor's never even spent 10, 15 minutes with me, let alone 2 hours. So I got home, I went into bed, and I told my wife was getting up and asked her to check out what's naturopathic medicine. And then when she came back home that night, she said, there's a school here in Ontario, in Toronto. And so I applied and I got in. But the point is this, is that in hindsight, I think this is the type of medicine, this is the type of doctor that allows me to be who I am in terms of my personality, where I'm able to sit for an hour and a half, 2 hours and ask questions. Like, it always comes down to, what's your story? So bottom line is this, is that I know that I'm still alive because of the chemo, the bone marrow transplant. But on the other side, I also know I'm still around some 40 plus years later because I learned how to listen to my body. I know my weaknesses and I know when my body talks to me and what to do. And as a naturopath now, as part of my not a calling, but the way that I think is that my gift, or what I tend to do with my patients, is sit down and listen to them and then tell them, this is your story and this is how your body reacts to challenges and this is what we need to do. So
So
that's where I come from.
thank you, Emile. So we are going to focus. I mean, we could have picked any topic today, but fatigue is such a big one, and it's central to many issues. And I know a lot of other naturopath or functional medicine doctor, and you approach things differently than most of the people that I know, because you talk about something called the terrain. So can you elaborate on what that is and how you're looking at that when you're evaluating your patients?
Sure. And I think we have to start though by looking in terms of our training to become a naturopath here in Ontario. And then, so again, what I like to tell my patients when I first see them is that we do have the science background and the medical training, in the sense that to get into the college, you have to have a university degree, and it's a 4-year full-time program. And during those 4 years, we learn anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, and pharmacology. And that's really important because we have to understand how the medications work to avoid any interactions when patients come in with a certain set of medications. But that's the academic learning. That's the book learning. And I always tell patients, you know what, the really learning starts when you're in front of the patients, when you're on the seat of your pants and you're learning as you go. And early on in my career, I had these mentors. I had like 3 great mentors that allowed me to focus my thinking, going from an evidence-based medicine, lab tests, and all that, to thinking outside the box and thinking about terms like terrain and constitution. So one of the things, though, that I really appreciated from these mentors is that they gave me a better appreciation to ask outside the box questions when the patients come in, you're not feeling well, all the tests are normal, then what? And as one of my mentors would say, well, congratulations, you're going to die healthy, right? But having said that, these mentors, one was a French doctor, a German doctor, and a couple of German doctors, is that they allowed us to think about terrain, and terrain really gets to the root cause of disease. And I like to explain, I'm a storyteller. I picture things in my head. So the easiest way for me to explain terrain is, think of this, is that we're made up of trillions and trillions of cells, and each cell lives in a swimming pool. If that swimming pool is clean, then the cell can get oxygen and nutrients that allow it to do its thing. So basically, if the cell is healthy, then the brain can think, the heart can work, the toes can work. So that terrain is the swimming pool. Now, if that swimming pool starts to get polluted with life, with poor life choices, smoking, drinking, eating junk food, you name it, if that swimming pool starts to get polluted, then the cell starts to starve. It can't breathe. It can't get the nutrients. One cell, no big deal. A million cells, you start to get fatigue. By the time a trillion cells are living in a polluted swimming pool, that's where the doctor says, oh, by the way, you have diabetes, MS, Parkinson's. So the terrain, the way I think of it, it's the foundational aspect of helping the person remain or get back into a state of health. So again, if we clean the terrain, then the cell can breathe and do its job.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
that's part of my training and all that.
Yeah, and you also mentioned patient's constitution. So, and I find that very fascinating how you're looking at someone and looking at what you call their constitution. So give us, explain what it is, and then give us some example.
Yeah, constitution. I think the easiest way for me to explain constitution is first give the big general description of what it is, and then let me break it down and explain what I mean by that. So the big picture of the constitution is that when that terrain is polluted, the body says, I need to do something about it. So constitution is the body's ability to, or the mechanism that the body chooses to deal with that toxin. For example, some people will create a fever. Some people will make garbage bags. Some people will punch holes in their body, i.e. ulcers. So the Constitution allows us to get an idea of how the body is dealing with this terrain, but it's also a question of definitions. So if I were to say to another clinician who's trained in the French way of thinking of terms of Constitution, all I'd have to say to this clinician is that this person's tuberculinic, and they'll know exactly what I mean. And the picture of that tuberculinic box or constitution is fatigue. So when we're talking about fatigue, so if the person is coming in with excess fatigue, well then we know that tuberculinic, this is their constitution, their system is polluted or the terrain is polluted. Now what do we do? So then we can become more specific with their needs based on their constitution. And so my French mentor, he would use words like luetic and tuberculinic and psychotic, SY psychotic, not PSY, like the mental health challenge psychotic. But the German fellow would use words like dyscratic or lymphatic. Chinese medicine is a very poetic form of medicine. I mean, I really like Chinese medicine because liver fire rising. So the patient comes in with migraines. I mean, liver fire rising, when we were at school and they were talking about that, it's like, what the heck does that mean? But now, as a clinician, it allows me to understand, okay, liver fire rises, migraines. Well, first of all, let's do tests. If it's a chronic thing, go get your CAT scan, MRIs to rule out any pathologies like a tumor or whatever. But again, if all the tests are normal and you have chronic migraines, well, then Chinese medicine looks at it in terms of liver fire rising. Well, let's clean up the liver. And also constitutionally, we can look at the eyes. So blue eyes, I mean, their lymphatic system. So there's a lot of tools that we have that allows us to define what constitution is. And as a constitution, then that just means that the body chose that way to deal with the toxins in the swimming pool or the terrain. And then it's up to us to give the tools required to support the body's choice of getting rid of those toxins. Another one is morphology, body shapes. I mean, you might have heard of this. I mean, some people have a pear shape, other people are an apple shape, other people are skinny as a rake. And so again, when I'm looking at a patient, I'm looking at their eyes, what color is their eyes, what color, what's their body shape, and then asking specific questions and listening for key questions. Asking key questions, I'm listening for key words, and that allows me to say, okay, this person is tuberculinic or whatever. So it's an overall way to get an outside the box thinking of how to help the patient improve their health.
Yeah, and you make such an important point too, as in, there's one thing to work remote and online and so forth, and I know you do that, but it's just there's something about seeing a person face to face to gather all this information. There's something that you mentioned, and the audience may not know what you meant: garbage bags. So explain what you mean, because I think it's a brilliant analogy of what the body is doing.
Yeah. So one of my book mentors or online mentors is a guy named Dr. Reckenwig, and this was a medical doctor from Germany. And over the years, he was able to clinically observe how the body would process these toxins. And he would, I use this a lot in my live blood analysis and explaining to people, this is your story. But he noticed that some people, when their body's challenged, they have a lot of energy, and it's like hyper energy. So if they get a fever, it's like a high fever. If they get an allergy, it's a big, huge allergy. So the body chooses to eliminate the toxins through that explosive elimination through the skin or whatever. Then he also categorized people and put them in the box where they're pro-inflammatory. So, I mean, anything that ends in itis, sinusitis, arthritis, gastritis, you name it. So anything that ends in itis is an inflammatory phase. So if the body's challenged with something, well, then it'll react by trying to burn off that toxin and inflammation. And then he also did define what is known as the deposition phase, where if the body can't get rid of it, and it's there, the body makes the decision, I have to protect the more vulnerable tissues like the heart, the brain, etc. So some people will take that garbage and store it in a tissue. So the more convenient tissue that the body will use to store it is the fatty cells. So if there's a toxin in the body and you can't get rid of it, well, let's put it in the garbage bag. And then, so that can show up as cysts, abscesses, tumors. So when I say garbage bag, I mean, I'm so used to talking about it, but it's a visual way of saying, you know what, your body's polluted and you're not pooping, you're not getting it out. Your body says, I got to do something with it. Oh, let's put it in the garbage bag. And each one of those, elimination, inflammation, and the deposition phase, they require specific forms of treatments and treatment plans. And that's the beauty of constitutional medicine. Once you get a feel for how the body works, well, then you know what? This is what we need to do to help balance out the systems.
Yeah, I always love that analogy because again, we have to listen to the body, right? And if people have cysts and fibroids and so forth, it is not okay, and it's the body telling us that something is not working properly. So, Emile, let's dig a little bit deeper into why people are feeling fatigue. I mean, fatigue is such a general term, but there's a multitude of reasons. And obviously, you know, we're not with a specific patient, so we don't know their story and their constitution. But overall, let's dig a little bit deeper on some of the reason typically people have fatigue, and then your angle on it as well, because you are looking at things a little bit differently.
Yeah, you're right. Fatigue is one of those generic symptoms that it can be caused by a number of different things. So putting on my conventional thinking hat, I mean, you know what? First thing you have to start thinking about or the more common things you have to rule out is the thyroid. So is a person hypothyroid? So then you can do a blood test to see what the blood levels are. So then the doctor, if they suspect that you have a hypothyroid condition, pardon me, they'll do a blood test and then they'll prescribe accordingly to fire that up. So the thyroid is one of them that pops up a lot of times. In terms of there's different types of anemia. So if your body is not able to break down the foods that you're eating and you're not getting the B12 and folic acid, and you're not able to absorb the iron, well then you can get into the pernicious anemias. For women who have heavy menstrual periods, they might lose a lot of blood and they might lose a lot of iron, which can lead to that excess fatigue. So hormonally, is there a thyroid issue? Is there, like, I mean, in terms of the hormonal system, is the woman experiencing all these endometriosis and heavy bleeding? Those things factor into the equation. And then there's also lifestyle. I mean, you know what? Are you a couch potato or are you moving? Are you eating junk food? Are you eating I won't name any of the brand names, but are you eating a junk food or are you eating your broccoli? So those are the conventional forms of explanations as to why you might be fatigued. But what if? I mean, what if, you know what, your thyroid comes back and it's normal? What if you moderately eat junk food once in a while, but mostly, you know, you're eating healthy, you're eating your veggies and all that. What if your hormonal system as a woman, you don't have any PMS, you don't have any heavy metals, heavy menstruations, you're not losing blood? Then what? Well, then that's where constitutional medicine comes in. But here's the thing, you know, as a clinician, we're trained to think this way, but based on my training and based on my experience, we have to also factor in things like historically, as a species, what were the biggest challenges that we had to face in terms of our overall health? So things like poverty, starvation, poor sanitation conditions, wars, famines, all of these things would affect the body's ability to function properly. And it would show up as, I mean, big, huge cases of tuberculosis and the syphilises and all the different STDs. So historically, our lifestyle was such that that can lead to the fatigues. But fast forward a couple centuries to today's modern society, what we're living through, not only do we have to still deal with all these bad bugs, like the polios and all that, but we also have to factor in, well, we live here in Canada, we live in a cold country, so where do our veggies come from? They come from California, Mexico, loaded with pesticides, herbicides. We're exposed to hundreds and hundreds of chemicals on a daily basis. We're exposed to genetically modified foods. So all of these modern challenges can put a strain on the body's ability to get rid of stuff, and it shows up as fatigue. So as a clinician, you know what? I mean, I started thinking in terms of let's do some blood tests to see what's going on. But talk to me. Talk to me about your diet. Talk to me about the stresses at work. Talk to me about your hobbies. Are you playing with chemicals? Are you into like Chemlon? Are you into I didn't want to say names, but are you exposed to all these chemicals? And then mold. Mold is starting to be a big factor too. We're seeing mold in all places at work, on the foods that we eat that look kind of like right, but you know what? Food is expensive, so I'll just wipe off that mold off my peach and I'll eat it. So there's a lot of exposure to mold, which would also affect our energy level. So when a person comes in with fatigue, in my head is I'm going through all these why kind of questions, and I'm starting to build a link between all the systems to trying to figure out or go to that root cause. What's actually affecting the terrain? Is it poor diet, or is it mold, or is it pesticides? And based on whatever's in that terrain, that's what allows me to say, well, this is what we need to do to open up that terrain constitutionally. This is how we get rid of it. And then you know what? It's up to you to stop eating moldy pears or whatever else that could be leading to that toxic terrain.
Yeah,
Does
and
that make
add
sense?
EMF to that. It totally makes sense. And add EMF to that. A couple of shows
Exactly.
ago,
Yeah.
I had someone that we covered a lot about electromagnetic sensitivity and how people are exposed. Light as well. We talked about that. Bright light at this time of night versus we should have the red light. So there's a lot that can affect us at a cellular level. And I know you're a big fan of the mitochondria in its study, because the mitochondria is basically the powerhouse of our cells. So we want to keep it healthy. And I know that's what you look at when you're looking at your taking care of your clients.
Well, as a matter of fact, the mitochondria has been on my radar for quite a few years now, and it's always the same thing whenever I go to or listening to webinars or go to talks about the mitochondria. It's always like, this is what it is, and this is what's happening. But me in my head is like, there was one of the key doctors researchers in mitochondria health that came to Ottawa, and as he was talking, we started to get a bit of a report, and I asked him, you know what, how can we mere mortal clinicians have access to testing to see the function of the mitochondria? And he kind of giggled at this point, like at that time, a few years ago, he was giggling. He says, at this point, it's just at the academic, at the research, at the laboratory research levels that they're able to test the function and what's happening at the mitochondria level. But as a matter of fact, so it's been on my radar for the past little while. So all that terrain, it goes back to this whole idea of the terrain. There's this branch of science called epigenetics, where these researchers are able to say that if the swimming pool is polluted, it can turn on or turn off the DNA for cancer or whatever. But if that swimming was polluted and the cell can't breathe and get key nutrients into the cell, well, the mitochondria is sucking wind, and it's not able to get vitamins and minerals have been trivialized, but these are key cofactors in terms of helping act like a spark plug to get all that biochemistry inside the cell to produce the ATP to give us the energy. So the mitochondria is a big, big, big part of the research. And you know what? You mentioned that you went to a conference in New York not too long ago, and that there are some light down the tunnel where as clinicians, we might be able down the road to order some tests to see how that's functioning. So that's exciting for me. So you
Yeah,
might want to elaborate on that.
and I'll keep you posted on that, because I have the name of the company, and you and I always test things for ourselves and make sure that things are what they appear to be. But it is exciting to have that, and even talking about genetic and epigenetics, and like you said, that the genes, if our lifestyles are really good, those genes can be turned off. And I always like the percentage of 95% is probably epigenetics, or our lifestyle, and 5% genetics, because we often hear that from people, oh, I've got bad genes. Okay, very, very true, but there is a lot that we can do about it. So, Emile, let's dig into the live blood cell analysis. This is something that I've experienced myself. I've gone, a few years ago to your office. And so some people are completely new to live blood cell analysis. Tell us what it is. And I know you also have some visual that we can talk about.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me state that me personally, as a clinician, I view lifestyle analysis as a tool to
Mhm.
give me a sense of how polluted that swimming pool is. So I do not make any diagnosis off of the live blood cell analysis. Now, having said that, clinically experienced, I've been doing live blood and I've seen hundreds and hundreds of hours of live blood. So clinically, I got a good feel for some things in the background that allows me to notice what's going on in terms of the terrain. So live blood it's been around, well, since about the First World War, and there's a German scientist who was working up the front lines with the German soldiers, and they would bring the soldiers in, and through live blood he would see the changes, and based on what he saw in the blood, allowed him to diagnose, well, this patient is about to die, or this patient needs this to help him do that. So live blood has been around for quite a while. Now, over the years, they've been able to explain it more as we get more understanding of the physiology, biochemistry. It gives us a better idea of what the blood actually does. So, what does live blood do? First of all, I tell people when you go and get the conventional blood test, you're given numbers. You have 5 million red blood cells, or you have 3 million white blood cells. Well, great. Well, live blood cells allow us to see how they're actually functioning. Meaning this, so when I look at the live blood and it's healthy, the red blood cells, you'll see a picture in a moment, but the red blood cells are like little dots floating around in the river and they're moving around. So they're hundreds and they're all moving around. And if the person happened to have a fatty meal, you might see these little snowflakes, and that's actually called chylomicrons. It's like the fatty particles that are floating around. So by looking at the blood, if they're free flowing, like there you go, the picture on your left, these are what red blood cells tend to be normal looking. And so then you have to ask yourself, well, what does the red blood cell do? It grabs hold of oxygen and it transports that to the brain, the heart, the liver, the toe of the cells. So as long as that swimming pool, that terrain is clean, well, the background is clean and the red blood cells are free flowing and moving around. And actually, here it's still pictured, but it's fun to watch them move and do their thing. So live blood is a nice tool to see how the cells are actually functioning. Now, when it comes to fatigue, if you look at the right side picture, well, as a clinician, I take a look at this and I start thinking in terms of nutrition. Those rolls, those little line things that you see, those are actually the red blood cells that are stuck together like a roll of quarters. And then you see like on the bottom, like at the 7 o'clock position, and underneath that, you see like these little lines. Well, those are actually like filets. They're called filets. So those are actually fibrinogen. These are like little molecules that pop up when we cut ourselves, and it's part of that healing process. But to me, as a clinician, when I see this, the first thing that I think of is that this person's calcium, magnesium, potassium, these are minerals that are called buffers. Well, this person is low on these minerals, allowing these red blood cells to stick. So how does this relate to fatigue? Well, picture this. Imagine that you're at home, you have 10 plates, and somebody put crazy glue on your plates, and you have 10 guests coming. Well, because of the crazy glue, all you can do is put food on the top plate, but you can't put food on the 9 other plates. Well, one first thing, your guests are going to get pissed off. But the bottom line is this: instead of getting 100% oxygen to your brain, to your muscles, to your heart, to your toes, you're only getting like 80%, 80%, 75%. And that leads to things like brain farts or muscle fatigue or shortness of breath. Why? Again, because you're not getting 100% oxygen to your brain, which can show up as fatigue. So if I look at this and the person talking to me about fatigue, well, then I start thinking, is this person eating a healthy diet with a lot of vegetables? Is this person able to absorb all the minerals? So there's a lot of questions but from this image, that starts to make me think, why? Why is this person low in energy, and why is the red blood cells all stuck together? Now, if we go to the next slide,
All right.
thank you. Now, I mentioned before that there's different types of anemia. So on the picture on the left side, on that top circle, that smaller circle, well, that's what a normal cell looks like. A normal red blood cell, the size is. Now, when they're bigger, when the red blood cells are bigger, these are like mega cells. There's different types of anemia. So there's pernicious anemia. So when I see the different sizes of red blood cells like this, I know that there's anemia, and it leads to leading to the fatigue. So what causes these big cells? Well, is the person able to absorb B12, folic acid? So when the person is low in B12 and folic acid, one of the symptoms is like MS-like symptoms, like, I mean, the muscle fatigue. It leads to brain farts. It leads to overall fatigue. So again, when I look at the red blood cells and I see these different sizes, I start thinking, is this person able to absorb their minerals? And then what type of, and how can we address these types of anemias? Now, I mentioned, like, if you look on the right side picture, it looks like a big shiny thing and dark in the middle. I mentioned mold, but one of the things in terms of that I'm seeing a lot of that can lead to the fatigue is that we've been there's a condition called dysbiosis, which is a big fancy word that means that within our intestines, the bad bugs have taken over. So when I see this image, I know that the person's got some kind of like yeast or fungal infection or candida. So then I start asking questions in terms of talking about your diet. So if it's high in sugar, well then, okay, you know what? You're just feeding the bad bugs. But also talk to me, have you ever had antibiotics for whatever reason? And today the antibiotics are so powerful that they completely wipe out all the good bugs and bad bugs, leaving us vulnerable to things like C. difficile or staph or different kind of bacteria, or even yeast and candida. So when I see this image, I know that the body is fighting this kind of like mold. Oh, also, like, I mean, mold is also can show up in the blood. But when I see this, I start thinking, maybe the fatigue is coming because the body, these molds, these fungus, just like plants, and they're releasing their own metabolic waste. In other words, these cells are releasing their own pee and poo or metabolic waste, which is also filling up that swimming pool, and that swimming pool is becoming toxic, and the cell can't breathe, which down the road leads to fatigue. So those are but a few of the images that I can see when I'm looking at the live blood. So we're done with these slides. So the live blood cell analysis, again, is not a diagnostic tool, but again, based on what I see, there's other patterns that pop up. If I see a clear crystal, I know it's uric acid, so I have to work on their diet. So it's a tool that allows me to assess the terrain, and it's quick and easy, and people are visual, and it's like they can say, this is your story, your blood is stuck one on top of each other, and they're stuck in the spider web. So I don't know where you're living and all that, but here in Ottawa, our big highway is the 417. If talking to people in Toronto, it's the 401. People in Montreal, it's the Décarie or the Métropolitain. So just picture your big major highway, and it's bumper to bumper, nothing is moving, and the spider webs, when you got a fly stuck in the spider web, it ain't moving. So there you go. That's live blood cell analysis.
And I think, Emile, what's really cool, like you said, it's fast and easy, and it's nice for patients to get tested more regularly and see the progress in their blood, right? Because it's one thing sometimes to do blood tests for patients, but you send them home with things to do, and we don't test them for quite some time, and it can be a little bit discouraging for them. So we're going to take a short break, Emile. Hold that thought, and we will be back to discuss what people can do at home to self-test, and there are things that they can do as well to work on their own fatigue. So we'll be right back.
In today's world, the flood of health information feels endless. But amidst the noise, two experts with over 50 years of combined clinical experience come together to help you with Smart Cuts, biohack your health span, cutting-edge protocols for greater energy and performance. Dr. Paul Sly, a beacon for athletes, weekend warriors, and those seeking to elevate their potential. And Dr. Nathalie Beauchamp, renowned for empowering individuals in their health journeys. Together, they've produced the book, Smart Cuts, Biohack Your Health Span, a protocol-based treasure trove packed with actionable steps. Journey through 5 transformative sections. Dive into sleep, hydration, movement, brain health, and even the secrets of longevity. Guided by their expert hands, unleash the best version of yourself. With over half a century of clinical wisdom and innovative protocols, reclaim your health and redefine your limits. Are you ready to embark on this transformative journey? Smart Cuts, available now.
Welcome back to Hack Your Health with Dr. Nat. We are with Dr. Emile Compan, and we are talking about fatigue. And Dr. Emile has just shown us live blood cell analysis and what it looks like. And I think, Emile, you wanted to make one more point on what we discussed earlier.
Right, in terms of like how easy it is, it's just a little pinprick, just the same thing diabetics do. I call it my mosquito with an attitude. But since I have access to a drop of blood, I also measure their blood sugar levels, right? So if the patient starts talking about like they crash after eating lunch, well, then I start thinking about hypoglycemia. So again, with this little live blood analysis, that little drop of blood, it lets me know what their blood sugar levels are. And surprisingly, when I do this, a lot of people are like their blood sugar is high on the higher end. So again, I start thinking about fatigue, is it hypoglycemia? So a simple little test, it gives us a lot of information.
And then following to that, there are other tests that you give to your patients that they can do at home. So I know there's one that you call the burp test. Would you care to elaborate?
Yeah. Well, as a clinician, as I take the case, I start thinking about the why kind of questions. And sometimes as a clinician, I get to a point where, do I go right or do I go left in my treatment plan? So instead of so before I start ordering these expensive tests, there's certain little tests that I order. And one of them is called the burp test. And this is straight high school chemistry. So if I suspect that the person's stomach is not able to digest or transform the foods that we eat, well, then I ask the person in the morning for the next 2 or 3 days, first thing when you get up in the morning, take like half a teaspoon or a teaspoon of baking soda and add it to a quarter cup or half a cup of water. Yes, it's going to be taste acidic, but what I'm looking for is that when you drink this, it's just straight high school chemistry. You mix a base with an acid and you'll get that volcano, that paper mache volcano. So what I'm expecting is for the person to start burping within the first 2 or 3 minutes. If they don't burp after 3, 4, 5 minutes, then in my head as a clinician, okay, this person might have low hydrochloric acid or acid production, so they might have problems digesting their foods. So, for example, if they can't process or digest their T-bone steak, well, then the stomach normally transforms that, but if it can't break it down completely into individual molecules, that piece of T-bone will go into the intestines. So then it'll show up as gas and bloating, and it's like a lot of cramps. So the burp test is a quick and easy little test that I ask people to do just to give me a sense of how to help the stomach become more efficient at breaking down the foods it's eating, i.e. proteins and all
And
that.
one
So
thing on
it's something
that,
to do. But the thing is, like you have to start burping within the first 2 or 3 minutes.
and it's such a good point too. And I think we need to elaborate, there are so many antacids on the market right now. It drives me crazy on how, we're trying to stop the acid, and yet we should be producing more in order to digest. So it's, do you mind, explaining what I mean by that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was at a conference. I just happened to be sitting next to gastroenterologists, and we were talking about these medications that they belong to a family called proton pump inhibitors. So we'll just stick it at that. But the thing is like he was saying that these drugs were initially conceived for a 6-month use. Like if the person had a stomach ulcer, we need to stop the production of hydrochloric acid to allow the tissue to heal. But the lifestyle and the choices we make, I don't want to stop eating my chicken wings, and I don't want to stop this. So you know what? It's so convenient to take antacids and these proton pump inhibitors that, you know what? I'll take it and the hell with it. But the thing is that the stomach needs to be in acidic form to be able to transform the proteins that we eat into individual amino acids. Here's another factor too. The stomach has to be in acidic state to be able to absorb minerals. So if you could eat all the vegetables in the world, you can take all the multivitamins in the world. But if your stomach is not able to break down and help with the absorption of these nutrients, well, then you're sucking wind. You're not getting the B12, leading to that macrocytic anemias. So it's a lifestyle kind of question. And down the road, if you continue, if you, the type of person I am, I'll do Google searches and I type in side effects and long-term side effects. People who are on these PPIs, because they're not absorbing the calciums and magnesiums and all these things, down the road for women, it increases the risk of osteoporosis. And that's not me saying that. So if you go to the medical journals, I mean, and that look into the long-term effects of some of these medications, it shows up. One of them is osteoporosis.
Yeah, yeah.
So
What?
the health of the stomach has to be maintained to be able to absorb and break down and absorb the foods we eat.
Yeah, so important. What other test, Emile?
Well, if I start thinking about this person, you know what I mean, the thyroid might not be working properly, and so did your doctor do a blood test? And he says, "Yep, everything is normal." Okay, well, did they test the thyroid? Yep, everything's normal. What did he test? Well, I don't know. So again, if I'm suspecting that the thyroid might not be working 100%, well, then I might ask him to do what is known as the basal body temperature test. And test has been around. I mean, there's controversy of whether or not it's effective or not. I mean, some women who are in trying to conceive, I mean, they're monitoring their body temperature to find out when, you know, the mucus plug or the ovulation is. So the basal body temperature, again, is a ballpark test that I ordered to see, do I need to look into ordering blood tests to see what's actually happening with the thyroid? And it's a simple little test. So if you have a thermometer at home, whether it be, if it's a mercury one, just shake it down to get the mercury down to 0. But most people have those digital ones. So put it on your nightstand, and when the alarm clock goes off, put it underneath your armpit and let it do its thing. The number I'm looking for is 36.5 degrees Celsius. Sorry, I don't know what the Fahrenheit is for our
You'll have to
American
figure
friends
it
is,
out.
but you know, you can convert it. So 365 days a year, so 36.5 degrees Celsius. If it's constantly 35, 35, 34, 34, I asked him to do it for about 4 or 5 days. So if you get an average, again, if it's 35 or less, maybe we need to do a further blood test to see what's going on with your thyroid. So again, this is a simple little test that gives me a sense of, do we need to order more specific tests to rule out any possibility of thyroid not functioning, leading to, well, I guess in this case, or this theme is fatigue. So that's a simple little home test that you can do.
Excellent. And then another thing that I know you're a big fan of are the pH test to look at urine, and very easy to do, very practical. So what information are you looking at when you have patients do that throughout the day?
Yeah, this is a big can of worms that we're opening up here, because it has to do with the buffering system of the body. So the body has these key minerals like calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium. So all of these collectively, these buffering minerals help to neutralize acids in the body. So we get acids through the foods that we eat, and then the medications and all that, and it produces what is known as metabolic acidosis. And when we look at the blood, so in terms of like the doctor talk, when we see the rouleau and the spider webs and all that, I know that this patient is in a state of metabolic acidosis. So that it lets me know that we need to provide these buffers, these calcium, magnesium to the story. And then there's a respiratory acidosis where the person gets rid of carbon dioxide and all that. So if the person has asthma, COPD, emphysema, if they're a smoker, well, then they're not able to get rid of that. So that has to do with the acid-based terrain or the environment in which the cell lives in. And I'm mentioning all of this because a lot of people have a misconception. They'll come into my office and they say, my body's acidic. Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, I'm always full of acids. I have like a lot of reflux. Well, okay, that just lets me know that, you know what, your stomach is working hard. And sure, you need to take those PPIs to protect your esophagus. So you don't get Barrett's esophageal or Barrett's cancer. But the stomach, each tissue of the body has to have its specific pH. And the stomach has to be acidic. The intestines has to be alkaline. So all that to say is that to measure the body's terrain or the body's buffering acid or the buffering mechanisms, the urine pH is a very, very elegant way to figure out if you have enough of those buffering minerals in the body. So if I see the rouleau and the filet, this is what I want you to do. For the next few days, I want you to take your first morning urine. Sorry, take a step back. There's these little pH, depending on a lot of the health food stores will sell these little strips of pH paper and all that. So just rip off about an inch or so. So take that piece of pH paper, and the first morning urine, you're going to pee on the stick and it's going to change color. And I want you to record that color. And it should be acidic. So anything less than 7. So 7 or less is what we're looking for. And then in the afternoon before you eat, pee on the stick a second time, and this second value should be a little more alkaline. So the normal physiology of the body's buffering system has to be acidic in the morning and alkaline in the evening. So if you're acidic throughout the whole day, I know that you don't have enough of these buffering minerals, calcium, magnesium, to neutralize those acids, which down the road can lead to osteoporosis. So it's a quick and dirty way of figuring out the buffering system, if there's enough minerals or not. And this was put together by a German scientist who was able to monitor the cycle of the urine pH, and he was noticing that it's normal to be acidic in the morning and alkaline in the evening. And I can give you another reason why that is if you have time. But in terms of the urine pH, that's a simple little way for me to figure out how is the perfect buffering system and how is it affecting the terrain.
Yeah. So I always like to give people practical tips. So what are your top 5 tips that you want to give to people? And if we have time, we'll discuss supplement. But let's talk about what are the most important things for people in terms of fighting or handling or taking control of their fatigue.
Well, first of all, you know what? You have to start thinking about sleep. I mean, sleep hygiene is very important. I mean, we're in front of the boot tube, we're in front of a blue screen, we're before falling asleep, and our brain doesn't shut down. So we need that restorative sleep to be able to heal the body, allow the body to detoxify itself. Sleep. I like to ask a lot of sleep questions in terms. Talk to me about your sleep pattern. Do you have problems falling asleep or wake up at 2 in the morning? So by asking these kind of sleep kind of questions, it starts to give me a sense of maybe their adrenals are not working properly or thyroid's not working properly. Sleep apnea. I mean, a lot of people have problems falling asleep and they have sleep apnea. So bottom line, if you're not able to get that restorative sleep, well, then it will affect your body's ability to cope and deal with the life events down the road. So one day of anemia of not sleeping, not a big deal, but if it becomes chronic,
Yeah.
then it becomes a problem leading to fatigue. Breathing. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, we have in our book, we have an entire section on sleep and recovery. And every presentation that I do, it seems I talk about sleep. And I kind of joke that it's boring, but it's so basic. It's so important.
Yeah. And things we don't even think about, but sleep hygiene. If you're in front of if you're gaming or you're reading or you're watching the thing before it lights out, your brain is going a mile a minute. So we don't think about the sleep hygiene. And that's a big factor there too. Another thing in terms of your question, breathing. We don't know how to breathe. I mean, I'm as guilty as anybody else, right? But I mean, I'm a geek. I can sit down in the morning, get my coffee, and I start working. And if I don't have life commitments, well, then I can spend the whole day. Next thing you know, I look up, it's like, oh, 6 o'clock in the afternoon, I didn't do nothing. But we don't know how to breathe. And looking at live blood, when I see the blood is all sludge and congealed and it's all packed up together, well, then you know what? Just out of curiosity, you know what? I asked the person, well, your blood is sludge, but here's the thing: step back, and and then I start cleaning the microscope, but I asked him to sit back and take some deep yoga breathing. So get into your zone, deep yoga breathing, and then while I'm cleaning up, it might take a minute or two to clean up the slide and then all that, get prepped, and I take another blood sample. It's amazing how it can go from being sludgy to be free-flowing red blood cells. So bottom line is we don't know how to breathe. And joking around with my patients, I said some people have these smartphones. Well, put a little beep beep. So every 2 hours, have it go off, breathe dummy, because we don't know how to breathe. So breathing is a big factor. Movement. We have to move with this lymphatic system. We have to be able to get all that. Swimming pool has to be clean, and it gets cleaned by the lymphatic system. And the easiest way for me to explain the lymphatic system is that think of it as the body's sewer system. All that swimming pool that gets polluted, that pollution has to get out somewhere, and it's the lymphatic system. Well, there's no muscles, there's no pipes per se, and the lymphatic system moves like those in summertime you have those little freezies in the bags that you have to push to get the freezy out. Well, that's what movement does. So as you move, your muscles are squeezing on that lymphatic system to move out all that toxin. But if that swimming pool is not working, the lymphatic system is not able to push it out, well, then the garbage stays there. And, Hodgkin's, the cancer I had was Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is the lymphatic system. So pH and the lymphatic system became my main focus. Like, what the heck is all that about? So we don't know how to move. And for women, it's just rebounding. You know what? I mean, um, I don't know, some 30, 40 years ago, there was one of these Nova things, and they were talking about the lymphatic system. And I don't know how they got the camera in there, but they had a camera showing the lymph moving or the garbage moving, and they had people yelling and screaming and all that, and nothing was moving. But deep yoga breathing, and it was like a Hoover vacuum. So deep breathing really helps to move that. And rebounding, those little rebounding for women, it's really important. Just that rebounding, just enough to be able to hold the conversation, but that rebounding helps to move the lymphatic system. And that becomes important for women because that underneath the armpits and all that, around the breast tissue, there's a lot of the lymphatic system. If that gets clogged up and those garbage bags, well, a lot of times I asked about the woman's breast tissue. Are you prone to making cysts and abscesses? Yeah, sometimes it's here, sometimes it's there, but sometimes it goes up and down. But ill-fitting bras or not moving your lymph can
Mm.
leave you vulnerable to cyst formation in the breast tissue down the road. And if you have a predisposition to breast cancer, well, then you know what? That's something we have to work on. So we don't know how to breathe. And then diet. I mean, diet is almost like a no-brainer, and there's so much out there. We are what we eat, and like my mentor says, we are what we eat and can eliminate. But if you're eating junk food every day, well, then you know what? I mean, your body is not able to get the key nutrients to function properly. Water. We don't know how much water we need. I mean, thirst is the last symptom, but fatigue, muscle aches, brain fog, brain farts, all these other symptoms pop up that let us know that we're dehydrated. And when I look at the live blood cell analysis, I mean, normally just picture in your mind's eye a nice juicy grape. But when the person's dehydrated, it looks like a dried out raisin. Literally, it looks like a dried out raisins. And I kind of laugh and I say, you know what, you're a California raisin. Your red blood cells are all sucked, they're all dried out. So we don't need to drink. We need water to drink. Um, the last thing, you know what, the fifth thing is like we have to have a medical doctor on our side. I mean, we do need to have access to all these different tests, diagnostic tests like MRIs, CAT scans. We do need to have these people on our side to be able to provide the tools and the treatments required. So, but if all the tests come back as normal, then what? And out of frustration, people go to their favorite search engine, they type in all their symptoms, and they come up with all these supplements that they need to take. And then they come into my office and they say, are these good for me? They'll put 20 balls in front of me. Are these good for me? So me as a clinician, well, then my part of my 2 cents to the story is, well, what's your story? What's your terrain like? What's your constitution like? Yes, this supplement is good, but not yet. You know what? Self-medication is a big, huge factor too, right? So, I mean, if you're taking, let's say you're on one of these SSRIs to help you with depression or anxiety, and then you go on your search engine and they say St. John's wort is good. Well, if you start self-diagnosing and then self-prescribing, well, then there could be counter interactions. So yes, you need the medical doctor, but you also need a clinician who's able to think in terms of constitution, in terms of terrain, what's your story, what medications you are, and then give you the remedies that are appropriate to help your body clean up and get rid of all the garbage. So you need people on your side.
Yeah.
So, and for me, having gone through cancer and all that, and I worked at a Jewish General Hospital in Montreal with a cancer survivor group. I know how frustrating it is. I know how fearful it could be. I know I don't even, you know what the thing is, people are asking the wrong questions. Like, are these supplements good for me? It's like, I don't know, my crystal ball broken. But you're asking the wrong questions. This question is like, what can I do to help get rid of? Or what can I do? And that's my job, is to help you ask the right questions.
It is so true that we have to be careful with vitamins and supplement to, again, a symptom, a medication, but a symptom and a vitamin or a supplement just to counteract what, there's lack of. We have to go deeper and look at the lifestyle. But on that note, with supplementation, what are the common ones that you see when it comes to fatigue? You mentioned the B vitamins, the NAC can be valuable as well. Not that we're trying to suggest any specific thing to people, because you need to know your like Emile was saying, you need a clinician to help you with that. But what are the supplements that are sometimes overlooked or it's completely missed?
Well, not all supplements are created equal, right? So you have some quality issues that pop into this equation too, right? So I mean, I'm all for going to Costco and buying 1 ton of toilet paper, but I question whether or not I want to buy 1 ton of calcium or magnesium from Costco because, you have to ask about the quality. But that comes into the way of thinking, because when you start thinking, I have fatigue and I want to start drinking more coffee or taking these power drinks or whatever, well, you're just trying to mask the symptoms. So if you start going on to your favorite search engine and you start looking at all your symptoms for fatigue, they'll start talking about, yeah, you have to help with NAC or glutathione and all this. But the whole point of today's discussion, in terms of at least what I hope to get through, is that it all comes down to what's your story. Are you able to break down? Are you able to absorb all these different things that you're taking? So the criteria that I use for prescribing medication, there's remedies that are specific for their different constitutions. So if the person's tuberculinic, well, then that person's big picture is fatigue. And the key remedies that they really need is they need a lot of minerals. So then I'll prescribe a mineral that's like a multi-mineral, something that provides all the full spectrum of minerals from calcium, magnesium, molybdenum, strontium, borons, etc. So based on their constitution, I might give a remedy like for a tuberculinic, make sure that they're getting a lot of these minerals. And then vegetables from A to Z, asparagus to zucchini and everything in between. So if you're not a vegetarian, don't have to become a vegetarian, but at least 3/4 of your plate should be made up of veggies. And then when you factor in, I mean, the broccoli of today ain't the broccoli of our grandparents, that also factors in. But so that's one of the criteria that I use. The second thing is a lot of these, I use a lot of professional brand vitamins because with the professional brand vitamins, there's a little bit more assurance that what's on the label is in the product versus like some of the cheaper brands will fill the capsule with some other binder or filler. So I use it with the professional brand companies. And so a case in point, I had a lady who was worried about like taking blue-green algae for her daughter because she heard that a lot of these come from lakes and there's a lot of geese that poop in the lake and all that. So I called my company and I said, this is what it is. So it's not like TV where you get your DNA response in 5 minutes, one of these crime shows. But it took about 2 weeks and I got my response that, you know what, they did their own analytical assay. There is no pollutants and all that. So the quality is there. And then there's remedies that are specific for constitution. So one, you mentioned my affiliation with Pasco Canada. I've gone to Germany for about 4 or 5 times, and so this is a pharmaceutical company where the integrity is there. But they also took us to the farms, and I have a whole new respect for these men and women who grow these plants. So one year I was talking to the girl, and she was talking about these flowers that are growing. The next year we went. Sometimes these plants can take 2 or 3 years before they can harvest them. The next year we went back, and they had a freak hailstorm, and they lost like 1/4 of their crop. So the quality in terms of me being able to say, yes, this product is safe and all that is a big factor. And then with medications, you know what, I can't go back to overemphasize the importance of the dangers of self-prescribing and self-medication. Because again, if you're on a ton of medications, a lot of these medications that you're on might be stealing the calcium, magnesium, and all that. So we have to provide that. But if you're taking like I mentioned before, I mean these SSRIs, and you start taking St. John's wort, it can make things worse. And if I'm just going to finish with this, I mean, a case in point, I was working with a girl who had a lot of she was a lot on anxiety and depression medication. So I knew if she was taking the doses and all that, so I was able to prescribe accordingly. But she was also being followed by a psychologist. But here's the thing, she wasn't telling the psychologist that she was working with me, and he upped and changed her dose, and I didn't know about it. And then when she was continued taking her medications based on what it was, so when I was prescribed it initially, she was doing fine and much better. But for whatever reason, the doctor changed the dosage, and then all hell broke loose. And she get into this SSRI storm and all that, and it's just like, oh my God. So there is a danger in terms of self-prescribing and self-medication. So those are some of the criteria that I use to prescribe. So I can have 5 people coming in with tummy problems, and all 5 of them, based on their constitution, based on their terrain, based on their lifestyle, all 5 of them will leave with a different strategy, even though they have the same symptoms of a lot of heartburn.
Hence the saying personalized medicine. So, Emile, we could speak for 2 hours, you and I, but thank you so much for bringing awareness. I'm sure people are, wide awake now with the information that you shared with them. So if people want to find out more about you, first of all, you are licensed in Ontario. You can work with patients in Ontario. Your contact is fnc.ottawa@yahoo.ca. We'll have, a show page for this as well. Go ahead, Emile.
Funny. It's FNC dot, so Frank November Charlie dot Ottawa at gmail.com.
Gmail. Oh my goodness. My bad. I wrote that down. At gmail.com. Good, because we have .ca in Canada, so .com. So thank you so much for everyone who tuned in. Hopefully you've learned a ton of good information, and these are things that you can bring and do at home, like the 3 tests that Dr. Emile was mentioning. And I really hope that you start thinking and integrating what you are learning. So thanks again for watching Hack Your Health with Dr. Nat. And until next time, stay healthy and fit.
Welcome to Dr. Nathalie's 7-Day Hack Your Health Challenge. Transform your fitness level with 7 quick, do them from anywhere workouts. Look and feel great. Nutrition. Master the art of optimizing your diet and maximizing nutrient intake with daily nutrition challenges. Biohacking. Unlock exclusive content to tap into your body's innate wisdom. Take on challenges to optimize your mindset and physiology. Ready to transform your health? Visit www.drnat.life to join Dr. Nathalie's 7-Day Hack Your Health Challenge. Your journey begins now.
This has been Hack Your Health with Dr. Nat. Tune in each week and uncover simple yet powerful strategies and actionable steps to elevate your health and wellness.